thank you so much for being willing to do this conversation with me. I've really been looking forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to speak to you.
If I recall correctly, I think the first time we met was in Macduff, around about 1995 or something, I think it would have been.
Was it way back then?
So, yeah, in my early AIM days, I remember.
Yes, yes.
What I remember about Macduff, and maybe my memory is not correct, it must have been early spring. We were in the vestry, I think, which is it an adjacent building or?
Yeah, well, it's an extension.
That and back into the front door of the church, if I remember correctly. The wind was blowing a gale.
Yes, yes, it's a kind of extension that was added onto the building.
Right.
And the building is set high up on the hill,
yes,
looking over the town, and it certainly gets plenty of wind.
I have to say that's my lasting memory of Macduff Church. But,
yes.
How is that work going now these days?
Well, I haven't heard a great deal, but of course it's part of the Church of Scotland still, and they're subject to a linkage or a union with other congregations, and it's all very different now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And painful it is, I'm sure. There's a sense in which you're glad to be out, I should think.
Well, indeed. For me, the leaving was not as traumatic as it was for some, because I was just at the point of retiring.
Right.
That was 2010.
Yes.
And then it was in 2013, I think, really, that the crunch came in the CFS.
Okay.
And then, I withdrew from it, and then a whole lot of others, far more costly for a lot of other people who were still in charges, who came out at that time. Around about 40 of us or so.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A very sad story.
Yeah, and it's going from bad to worse, isn't it? Generally,
Yeah.
and just
Yes. Yeah.
hasn't changed at all. No.
I don't know if you've seen I did a little book on the subject.
I read it, David. Yes, I appreciate that.
Which is a double meaning. It is a sad departure from the church, but it's the church's sad departure from the Word of God.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks, David. David, just tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would, just to introduce yourself to folk who may not be aware of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was brought up in Edinburgh, in Leith, to be precise, and then studied in Edinburgh, did a year in Princeton, and became a student for Church of Scotland ministry, and then eventually called to Macduff and spent the whole of my ministry there, almost 40 years in the one congregation, and then retired in 2010. And I'm now a member and a minister indeed of the Free Church, and just involved in supply in various places.
Yeah, great, excellent. So, going back to the beginning, how did you first sense God's call in your life to be a preacher?
It's a question that I find quite difficult to answer. I'm one of these people who can't really give a definite date of conversion. I was brought up from the beginning to love the Lord and to love His Word, and I can't really remember a time when I didn't, so far as I understood at the time, seek to do that. Mm-hmm. I've often resorted to C.S. Lewis's illustration. I don't know if you know about wakening up. And he says, you may not know that you woke up at 7:26, or was it 7:28 this morning, but I know I'm awake.
Yes.
Which is quite a good illustration. And that's true of my Christian commitment. And it's also true to an extent of my sense of calling. When I look back to school days, I do recall choosing for fourth year in secondary school, choosing to study Greek. And that was because I already had a sense of calling towards ministry, towards preaching. And what was even, to me, now more surprising was that the school I was at, that was Heriot's in Edinburgh, had an annual prize, the Morton Prize in Public Speaking. And I actually entered for it and won a book token or something. And I mean, looking back, I was my boy, really, and I'm quite surprised at myself. that I entered for that. But these two things were a sort of indicator that I was already thinking in terms of ministry at that stage. So the call came, you could say, fairly gradually over quite a lengthy period.
Right. Yeah. It's obvious when you discern the Lord's providence in preparing you in these different ways.
Yeah.
Before the reason became absolutely clear, isn't it?
Indeed. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So who were, maybe particularly in those early days, but even later on, who were or have been the great influences on you as a preacher, the sort of role models that you looked up to?
Yes. Our family connection in Edinburgh was with Tynecastle Parish Church, which is no longer now. It was a fairly strong evangelical church, but our family moved when I was about, I think, 11 or 12 to Broughton Place in Edinburgh. So I don't really remember much about Tynecastle. Broughton Place was a Dr. Gunn, George Gunn, but sadly he died shortly after we moved there. So after that, I would say that probably James Phillip was one of the biggest influences in my experience, even although he wasn't my minister. But I would often land up there on a Sunday evening maybe, or midweek, a Wednesday meeting. And I have a lot of memories of Holyrood and Jim Phillip's ministry, which was so significant for so many people, including for me. Right. I was thinking back earlier and remembering that one of the things there was the sense of, I don't know if we use the word gravitas or solemnity that there was. There was nothing lightsome or even cheery about his conduct of worship. It was solid stuff, solid preaching of the word. And the other feature of it, I think, was his awareness of the contemporary world. He would bring in references, for example, to the writings of Camus. And as a student, that appeals to one.
Yes.
But he was a big influence. And then when I was ready for assistantship, the church sent me to St. David's Broomhouse. It was the man Ron Sewell who was a minister there. And he also was a big influence on me. And I was very thankful because some students were sent by the church or presbytery, I don't know which it was, to very liberal places. But I was sent to Broomhouse. And Ron Sewell had a good, solid biblical ministry there. And actually, that was quite a formative time for me. So these are probably the two biggest personal influences. In the what you call the more distant scenes, I think the people I've admired and learned from would be people like James S. Stewart in Scotland.
Yes.
I had 1 year of him at New College in Edinburgh, New Testament. And then obviously, like many, owe a great debt to Martin Lloyd-Jones.
Yes.
I only heard him in person once, and John Stott. These were men that I've looked up to and still look up to. Yeah. And I think we still have a great deal to learn from them.
Indeed, yeah.
Yeah.
But mentioning people like Jim Phillips, that was quite a remarkable generation, wasn't it? People like the Phillips brothers and Willie Still and Eric Alexander, Sinclair Ferguson sort of coming up through the ranks of that. That was quite a remarkable period of time in Scottish history.
Yes, it was. And Sinclair's still going strong yet.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Yeah. Which makes the current tragedy of the Church of Scotland all the greater.
It does.
Because they've had these men of such godly influence and standing.
Right. And in recent times too, the men who've come out were all good men who could have been powerhouses within the Church of Scotland.
Absolutely.
Even at the present time and for the future.
Yeah.
But it really is a tragedy.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, yeah. Yeah, I was at the old BTI many years ago, but I did my church placement under Bob McGee in Falkirk.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Oh, you know Bob, so larger than life.
Indeed he was.
Right, coming as a Baptist into that situation.
Yeah.
He was a great man to work alongside, and
I'm sure he would be. Yeah.
I enjoyed his friendship and his support for 3 years. It was just a great joy for me. He was a wonderful character.
Yeah. He was a great character in the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. He was a doughty fighter.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I can believe that. Yeah. He used to go down to Falkirk, just started playing football on a Sunday, for example, and he would go down and protest outside the gates on a Sunday, or the local cinema would be showing something, and he'd go off and stand outside the cinema house and protest. Fearsome, I mean, fearful. A fearsome man, and fearless. He really was. And a great preacher, a wonderful preacher.
Yes.
So that was a great joy.
Yeah.
David, looking back, what advice would you now give your younger self, knowing what you now know?
I think I would probably say to read more and pray more. I've always been a reader, but I'm more and more aware of huge gaps in my reading and things that I wish I had read in earlier life. So in some ways, it's a matter of trying to catch up now. And I suppose everybody would say to pray more. That probably is one lesson one thing I would say to my younger self, to give more time to prayer. That, and I think the other thing, I probably one of my weaknesses was not doing enough to encourage younger men to come forward. I was actually thinking of that even in relation to my own 2 boys that are in ministry now. Probably I should have done more to bring them on in earlier days. I don't know if it was partly that I always I was very busy, just get on with the work. But that's something that I think, on reflection, I probably should have done more of, just trying to spot abilities in other people, whether for ministry or anything else, really, and encourage them, bring them on.
Sure.
So these are probably some of the things that I would say if I had the chance to my younger self.
Yes.
Lessons we learn along the way.
Yeah. I often wish, particularly when you see young men going into it, I often wish, I wish I was starting all over again.
Yes.
Because I could do it so differently, and all that wisdom that you hopefully gained over the years.
Yes.
You can't, that's life. So,
I don't know if you feel it as well, but I feel thankful for the people who put up with me in my young both in assistantships training, these poor folk.
Yes, I know.
In the early years in the ministry, too, people were kind and patient.
Yes, I know.
With a novice.
I forget what was that. I heard somebody some years ago, quite a well-known person, saying, every now and then I take my old sermon notes out and weep over them. Yes. And I thought, I do that with my first congregation, for example, or those who had to listen to me preaching as a 19, 20-year-old, and weep over them, because what they endured, I know full well was dreadful stuff, some of it. But God was gracious, and they were gracious to me. But
yes, I've heard somebody put the same thing in a slightly different way, saying to look at your early sermon notes keeps you humble.
It really is true. Yeah. As you survey the scene today, particularly in Scotland, but further afield if you wish, but what encourages you about the general state of preaching in the evangelical church, and where do you think are the weak spots? What concerns you?
Of course, as a preacher, you don't get that many opportunities to listen to other preachers, but I think one of the biggest things that I would put my finger on would be the lack of visiting alongside of preaching. I was actually taken, I don't know if you use the Banner of Truth calendar. It has a series this year of quotes from J.C. Ryle, and a new one turned over for March just a day or two ago. what is it? We have to speak to our people outside of the church if we're going to know how to speak to them in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, getting to know the people, getting to know who they are, what makes them tick, what their issues are, all that kind of thing. And I sense that amongst younger ministers now, there's not an awful lot of ordinary visiting that goes on, pastoral visitation.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing that concerns me. And a second thing would be the demise of evening worship, which is particularly notable, I think, since COVID.
Yeah.
An awful lot of places stopped evenings during COVID and never restarted.
Mm-hmm.
Even some places which are quite surprising, really strong Bible-believing churches. I think that evening worship is a tremendous thing to have, another opportunity for worship and for the preaching of the word. I say the preaching of the word. I suppose that's another thing that I sometimes worry about, is the substitution of other things for preaching. There are a number of places where they introduce discussion groups and study groups of various kinds, which is great. I mean, I'm all for small groups, house groups, study groups of all kinds, and following all these kind of courses. But I think that should really be an adjunct to the preaching ministry and not a substitute
Sure.
for
Yes.
it. So I think that's one of the things that would concern me somewhat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What else? I think this is going to sound a wee bit odd, perhaps, but sometimes men are inclined to be, this will sound odd, too much in the Bible, by which I mean not enough application and taking account of the contemporary situation. Because after all, we're not in the pulpit or lectern to give a lecture. It's not an academic exercise.
Yep.
And I think, well, actually, it's John Stott's famous thing about double listening.
Yes.
One foot in the Bible, one foot in the world, and bridge the two. And I think that need for application to the contemporary scene, that's so important.
Yep, I'm with you. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that ties in with saying as well about knowing the people that you're speaking to, so that you know their trials and troubles and questions and so on.
Yes, yeah. Which also goes back to what you were saying a moment ago about pastoral visitation. Mm-hmm. If you don't know your people and their situations, you're never going to be able to, in the right sense, target application to those real situations.
Without targeting in a personal,
of course. Directing may be a better word, but you're sort of I don't know how to describe it. You're sort of aiming at a vacuum rather than real people, real situations that you're familiar with within your church.
I don't know if you've heard that story of Spurgeon's about a mother and wee boy, and he was preaching about being a Christian at home, and he was laying it on thick apparently about are you one thing in church, but when you're at home, you have a bad temper, you're impatient, and all the rest of it. And the wee boy is supposed to have turned to his mummy and said in a loud whisper, "Mummy, how does he know what goes on in our house?" And of course he didn't.
Yeah, of course.
As they say, if the cap fits.
Yes. Out of the mouths of babes sometimes comes That's right. That's right. Yeah. David, what aspect of preaching, from preparation all the way through to delivery, would you say was the most demanding, the most testing? And I'm often interested to know, has it always been the same, or has it changed at different stages in your life?
Yeah. I think now the biggest challenge that I have is deciding on a text or passage. Partly because at the moment, I'm mostly doing one-off services in different places, and sometimes trying to decide where to go in Scripture is not easy, and discerning what's the right text for the right occasion.
Yes.
So I think that's probably one of the biggest things, in contrast to settled ministry, where usually in expository work, you know where you're going next Sunday, both morning and evening, you know where you're going to start. I suppose it's a mixture, mostly expository work through books of the Bible. In fact, I managed, by the time of the 39 years completion, to complete the whole Bible. Managed to work through every book. A combination of that, and also sometimes what would have been an older Scottish tradition, perhaps, of text preaching. Just choosing a text and preaching that text.
Yes.
Within a context, of course.
Yeah.
That has the danger of taking things out of context. But sometimes, sometimes there's a case for one-off things. I suppose notably Pentecost, Easter.
Yeah, of course.
Like that. So that's probably the thing that I find most texting now, which I didn't always find difficult.
Yes.
Other than that, I suppose just the sheer hard work of getting the commentaries out and trying to study the passage and get right into it and discern the meaning before we come to the application of it.
Yes.
Yeah, these are things that I don't know if they're any easier, really.
Okay. One of my students was saying to me on Saturday, the particular issue, he said, I just find this almost overwhelming as I come to preach. He says, it's always going to be like that. And I said, well, in a sense, yes, but maybe to a lesser degree, but it'll always be there, that issue. And I said, you need to be concerned actually when it's not there, because it probably suggests you're sort of relying on your own strength or wisdom or whatever else. It's not the most encouraging message to give to a young man, but it's the reality, isn't it?
Even in terms of just the feeling of, say, nervousness, or slight nervousness about preaching, even in a place where you preached regularly for many years.
Yes.
But after all, we're not just going in to have a little fun time. I mean, we're going in as messengers of the King, and it really is a solemn thing.
Yes.
I think that harks back to what I said I learned in Holyrood in these early years from Jim Phillip. The sense of occasion. This is a big deal.
Yes. That's right. That issue identified about sort of systematic preaching, but also the textual preaching. I think it was Jeff Thomas I interviewed on here some months ago, and he had this idea. I'm not saying it's original to him, but he was very strong on it. That we need to mix what he called the sort of Lloyd Jones approach and the Spurgeon approach.
Right.
And he said what he favoured was maybe in the morning doing systematic ministry, but in the evening doing some of the sort of great texts of the Bible. Because he said the problem is if you're doing systematic preaching, which is commendable and I would say is the staple diet, you can miss out the great purple passages, the great go-to gospel texts, for example. Because they might only come around every 2 or 3 years in your systematic preaching. And I like that balance. There's something to be said for that sort of dual approach, I think, to handling the text.
And I think too, sometimes there's the need to actually preach a more evangelistic message.
I agree.
Certain occasions, whether you officially call it a guest service or is around about Christmas, Easter time, should be quite. I mean, in one sense, we should be evangelistic all the time.
That's right.
But perhaps in a special way, from time to time.
I agree. Yes. Yeah. It also creates an opportunity to encourage folks to maybe bring a friend along because they know that the message will be particularly appropriate for them or accessible to them, perhaps in a way it might not always be on an average on an average Sunday.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen some of these things to do with the so-called quiet revival.
Yes.
You talk about perhaps quite a number of people, unbelievers, who would be ready to come if they were ever invited.
Yes, that's right.
Nobody ever invites them.
Exactly.
And that's, in a way, a simple thing.
That's right.
A friend, look, would you like to come along to my church with me?
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe there are more openings than we sometimes realise.
I think that's quite likely. Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. David, what one piece of advice would you give a young man who says, I want to start out on this road and explore if this is what God's calling me to? Where would you start them on that journey?
This is at the very beginning, before they're in ministry at all, you mean?
Yes. Yeah.
I think I would, for one thing, would say learn all that you can from, people like Jim Phillip, whoever is in your sphere of influence, to find a good Bible-believing church if you're not already in one, and learn and imbibe as much as you can there. That alongside of obviously just seeking, praying for the Lord's guidance to be made known, that inner sense of conviction.
Yes.
Which we then have to submit to others, of course, to find out what's recognised by other people. I think that's probably the best for somebody starting out.
Yeah, sure.
To not regard it as a job.
Yes.
It's not a job like any other.
No.
If you're looking for a real career prospect, go somewhere else.
Go somewhere else.
Yeah. But if you're really looking to serve Christ, then follow through in these things.
Yeah. But it is becoming like that in many circles of influence. Treat this like a job in terms of hours and expectations and contracts and everything else. And I just find that a very slippery slope, because there's a mental attitude there that sinks in. And I know there are legal things we have to take into account these days. But this is not a career. This is a calling. Yeah. It doesn't work like that.
I think in some probationers' conferences and so on, students are told, there are 3 parts of the day, morning, afternoon, evening, and you should work 2 of them every day, morning and evening, and morning and afternoon.
Yes.
Which I think is silly advice, really. And that's since when was ministry a job where you clock in and clock out?
Yeah, exactly right.
It's something that you do, it's something that you are.
You are. That's right. Yeah.
And I think being available to the people is important.
Yes. Yeah.
Obviously, there's the other side of overwork and burnout and all these things. We need adequate rest and refresh and relax. That's important as well.
Sure.
But I think probably the trend of the times is not so much in that direction.
No, I would agree. Yeah. And as you know, we had this correspondence in the Christian Press a year or 2 back about young men have been told, don't preach more than once on a Sunday.
Yes.
It's just.
Yes, it's bizarre. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
Where's the sense of the excitement and thrill of being allowed to preach twice a Sunday?
Absolutely. If I go to my first church and said we only want you to preach once on a Sunday, I said, well, I'm not interested, quite frankly.
Yes.
I've got a fire in my belly and I want to preach it.
Indeed.
So
I was like that too. Over the years, I had a number of approaches from other congregations to see if I would feel called elsewhere, which I never did. But that was one of the factors. If they said we only have a morning service, no, that's not for me.
I'm with you, yeah. What do you do with the rest of the week? What do these men do? That puzzles me sometimes.
That's right. I've heard somebody say, what is it? A 30-minute sermon really requires 30 hours of preparation.
Yes, yeah.
Said, and that really is a stupid thing to say.
It really is. It's crazy, isn't it?
If you're going to preach twice a Sunday, what else are you going to do after your 60 hours?
It's nonsense. It's nonsense. It really is. Yeah.
For one thing, you can't lay down any number of hours, or it's entirely a personal matter.
Sure.
But to suggest that, I think, probably puts a big barrier in the way of many people.
It does.
Yeah.
It's an unrealistic burden, isn't it? It's not. It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. Dave, thank you. I've enjoyed chatting. I just love chatting with men in ministry, particularly those who spend a lifetime in ministry, just learning some of their insights and wisdom. And I really appreciate your sharing that.